Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the UCCS Speaker Series. This is our final installment for spring 2024. And it's a very special installment for two reasons. First, because we have with us today the presenting team is the winner of the UCCS 23-24 Grow Our Own Public Lectureship and White Paper Competition. This was made possible through the Office of the Vice Provost for Academic Personnel and Planning at the UC Office of the President, and it's in line with the President's initiative to attempt to diversify the University of California faculty. There were a dozen submissions from throughout the UC system related to one of our two competition themes. One was environmental justice, and the second was creating a more functional democracy. And the winning team is led by Laura Ray Lake and Chris Wegemer, who are both from UCLA, and I'll say a bit more about each of them in a moment. The other reason, though, that this session is special is because we're honored to have with us a representative from the California Secretary of State's office, Deputy Secretary Janelle Jackson. Ms. Jackson oversees a department which has a number of programs to enhance participation in elections, including Promote the Vote California, which fosters partnerships with business interests to create a strong and diverse California. Prior to joining the Secretary of State's office, Ms. Jackson was principal consultant for the California Legislative Black Caucus, and before that she was a field representative for then Assembly Member Shirley Weber's district office. Following Deputy Secretary Jackson's introductory remarks, we'll hear from the UCLA team, beginning, I believe, with Laura Ray Lake? No, beginning with Chris Wegemer. Sorry about that. Chris is a postdoctoral scholar at UCLA whose work also focuses on youth engagement. He earned his PhD in education at UC Irvine in 2021 and has multiple publications ranging from civic motivation of marginalized youth to early childhood influences on later political orientation. Fascinating topic. Dr. Ray Lake, who will follow him, is professor of social welfare at the Luskin School of Public Policy at UCLA. Her research focuses on youth activism and civic engagement. As a member of Vote 16 Research Network, she is also editor or associate editor of the Journal of Research on Adolescence, and among other honors, was the winner of the 2020 Mid-Career Award for Research Excellence from the Society for Research on Adolescence. Drs. Ray Lake and Wegemer have assembled a group of UCLA undergraduates who helped them with their research for this award, and I'll leave it to the two of them to introduce their students. But I do want to say one word about the product. We asked that the competing teams think about how to assemble an evidence packet that consisted, like I talked about last week actually, of a review of all of the evidence available, referent in this case to promoting youth voting in California, along with original research to layer on top, and they've done exactly that. It's really an excellent read. I don't say that about too many policy-related products, and I recommend it to you. It's on our website at uccs.ucdavis.edu. For now, please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary Janelle Jackson to the podium to introduce today's topic and tell us a little bit about what her part of the agency is doing.
All right, good morning. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. As introduced, my name is Janelle Jackson, and I am the Deputy Secretary of State of Outreach and Education for the agency. I've been there for about 3 years, and prior to that, I worked in the legislature. I was explaining to the rest of the panel members earlier that there is a large difference from working in the legislature and then coming over to agency world. In the legislature, as you guys have identified in the white paper, there are policy recommendations and bills that are passed. In the agency world, we are responsible for implementing those. And it poses its own set of course, concerns and issues because when you're implementing, you want to make sure that you are following the law to a T, but also keeping with the original problem that existed from the law that was created. So that's the fun part that we have. And before I get into the outreach and education piece, the agency itself, the Secretary of State, is responsible for a number of pieces. People know the California Secretary of State, the individual, as the Chief Election Officer. Outside of that, the agency is also responsible for all business filings. So if you are an entrepreneur or you want to start a business corporation, you want to do an LLC, something like that, all of those things have to come through us. If you are looking to start a business, you have to file through us. And that's actually larger than our elections division, but it's not as well known as the elections division. But there are other public-facing pieces to the agency that are there, including business programs division. Within that division, they are required to they are also, responsible for all notaries. So if you know anyone that's a mobile notary, you may be one, you have to file with our office. All domestic partnerships go through our office. Trademark filings go through our office. So if you have a great idea, you want to trademark it, you have to go through our office in order to do that. They are also responsible for a healthcare directive, which you guys may be too young to worry about right now, but someday you may become a healthcare directive for a loved one. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you guys have questions outside, we do have a table outside with additional information. In addition to the Business Programs Division, we also are the holder of the archives. The archives lives within the California Secretary of State. This is very important to Dr. Weber because she is a history buff. And so when she came in, she wanted to make sure that the archives has items that are related to the diversity of California. So for the last 3 years, she has spent her time working with the archives, making sure that it represents what we are as a state, which is very diverse. In addition to that, we have our political reform division. And the political reform division, say for instance, you want to run for office one day, which we hope, you have to file all of your business through our office, so your campaign filings, all of that is through our office as well. So that is our public-facing side. Of course, we have like an HR, we have the technology department and things like that. But our most important, which I always say is most important, is the executive division. That is one of 7 divisions, and that's where we are housed. My role is to make sure that we are explaining to the state of California what the agency does on the public side. And the best part of my job is I have a very wonderful team. We are a team of 6, and 2 of those team members are dedicated only to college outreach and education as it relates to voting. And we have one of our coordinators here today, Wendy Galvan. And the purpose of the Student Votes Project, which is what she's a coordinator for, is to reach out to college campuses, college students, to make sure that you all have the tools you need to be successful for civic engagement on your campus. This particular program resulted from a piece of legislation, AB 963, back in 2018. And so from that, we have developed an entire program, especially when the current secretary came in after COVID. We were able to really dive into the legislation and kind of understand what the needs are for the college campuses. And that's where we come in. That's why we're here today, because you guys have provided us with a white paper of the idea that you had of looking at the barriers for young voters. We do know that there is a gap when it comes to young voters, and young voters can be 18 all the way up to 34, 18 to 24. So having this data is very important for you all to look at, so you can kind of get your friends and families, colleagues, and classmates together so you guys can get out there and vote. It is about voting, but it's also about civic engagement. So if you are part of a club on your campus, or you are part of student government. All those things have to do with civic engagement because you have to vote in order to take that certain seat. So my role here today will be to listen to, of course, the information that you all provided in the white paper, the recommendations that you have, and then kind of react to it, right? Looking at an agency standpoint, from an implementation standpoint, is that possible? Everything does start with the law, as I mentioned earlier, but is it possible to do? And one piece in particular is the high school voter education recommendation that's in the white paper. So I think that's it for now. I will be here on the panel and looking forward to listening to the information that you guys have today. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Appreciate your remarks, and looking forward to your reaction afterwards. I'm really grateful to have you here today. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us, both online and in person. And as you can see here, there are 5 of us who collaboratively conducted this research. And I just want to introduce the rest of the team real quick, since there is only time for 3 of us to speak. So Rio Sato is a 3rd-year undergraduate student at UCLA, double majoring in sociology and statistics, and he actually just recently won an award for the Dean's Prize for his independent research. And then we have Leslie Ortiz, who's a 2nd year at UCLA, and she's majoring in public affairs. And then we have Amy Wong, who's a 3rd-year undergraduate at UCLA, double majoring in philosophy and history. And all of us are part of Professor Ray Lake's Civic Life Lab, which advances understanding of how young people become politically engaged, and especially in order to inform democratic policies and practices. Now, at this point in the political cycle, elections are at the forefront of many of our minds. And in recent years, it's become increasingly clear that democracy is too often taken for granted. And we need to constantly reinvest in strengthening and expanding political participation. And today we're here to shed light on a critical but often overlooked issue that is that shapes the future of democracy in this country, and that's the barriers that young people experience to electoral participation. Now, you're likely aware that young people vote at lower rates than older Americans, so people aged 18 to 24 have lower voting rates than older Americans. And this trend has largely been consistent ever since 18-year-olds were given the right to vote in the 70s. As you can see here in the 2020 election, out of all eligible Americans, 61% of people voted, but less than half of young people voted. And this gap is actually more extreme in California. In California, the voices of nearly 2 million young people who are eligible to vote aren't being represented or heard politically. And young people have unique experiences of government institutions that can be critical for informing policies. For instance, young people are on the receiving end of public education and many social services that older adults may not be familiar with. And for decades, we've all heard the familiar critiques of young people that kids these days are apathetic or politically uninformed or too concerned with putting selfies on Instagram to politically participate. And maybe some of us are guilty of thinking of these things at some point or another. But research have found that this narrative emphasizes convenient stereotypes that don't adequately capture young people's perspectives or the policy landscape. A much more accurate explanation is that young people disproportionately experience barriers to voting. Specifically, youth experience structural barriers that limit political participation. And we define structural barriers as the policies and practices that systematically disadvantage young people in electoral participation. And age also intersects with race and class or disability status and other features to create more structural barriers for some youth rather than others. So the purpose of our study was to identify structural barriers that young people face and to make policy recommendations that might increase political representation of young people in California. And we used 3 complementary types of analyses. So first, we conducted a systematic review of the research literature to identify key barriers and summarize this data knowledge on the topic. And we used a systematic review method. We included peer-reviewed papers and white papers written 2010 or later that explicitly focused on youth barriers to voting. And we originally ended up with 288 papers through Google Scholar, and after screening, we ended up with 70 papers that we used to inform our key ideas. Second, we examined data that we collected immediately following the 2020 presidential election. We had 866 young people from around the country complete a 30-minute survey that explicitly focused on their experiences of voting and focused on the challenges that they encountered. And our sample was diverse. It allows us to compare the experiences of California youth with youth more broadly nationwide. And we conducted qualitative and quantitative analyses to examine youth experiences of these barriers that we found in the literature review. Lastly, we identified barriers to voting after we took the main ideas from a literature review and after we examined the patterns in our data, we evaluated California's policies. So we relied on a bunch of different data sources. We had the California Secretary of State's data sources, the US Census, Cost of Voting Index, and other sources in order to evaluate California's policies. So for this presentation, we have three main components. First, I'm going to introduce the major structural barriers that young people face nationwide. And I'm going to draw from our literature review and our qualitative data from our national survey. Then Rio is going to talk about the policy landscape in California, and he's going to draw from national statistics and quantitative analyses that compare California with the nationwide context. And then Laura is going to end our presentation with some evidence-based policy recommendations. Great. So the question is, what is keeping youth from registering and voting? And across the United States, our literature review found three recurring themes about barriers. Young people first experience disproportionate administrative burden when they go to register. And we all know that registering to vote requires proving identity and proving residency. And in some states and jurisdictions, this can be much more difficult than others. And this process of registering is typically more difficult for young people who haven't been through the process before and are new to voting. And young people are also juggling lots of different life transitions that are common for this stage of life. And this is exemplified in statistics of mobility. So every year, young people's ages 18 to 24 are more than twice as likely than older adults to move. And when young people move, they have to reestablish residency and then re-register to vote. And studies have also found that the greater the distance between a young person's hometown and their college, the less likely that they are to vote. And so this indicates that it's too hard to vote in college, and that if young people can't get back home, then they're not going to vote. The second general barrier that we found was disenfranchisement of college voters. And we didn't find direct evidence of this happening in California, but there's a long history of local jurisdictions that try to make it harder for college students to vote. And sometimes students are viewed as inferior to permanent residents, and they're less entitled to participate in politics. And also, politicians often assume that young people are liberal-leaning, and so some politicians have an incentive to exclude young people. And from the literature that we saw, we found that local election officials in cities and towns in Florida, North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, strategically moved polling places away from college campuses or reduced polling equipment at college campuses in order to obstruct youth voting. And local election officials have also redrawn voting precinct lines to divide college campuses, particularly historically black colleges and universities. Next, restrictive ID laws restrictive ID laws disproportionately affect young voters and first-time voters in general. Some states don't allow young people to use their college IDs to register, even if they're attending a state school and have a state ID. And studies have found that young people who don't go to college are even more vulnerable to ID restrictions than college students. So our study was able to look at young people's experiences across states, but in California and nationwide, and we captured young people's experiences of these structural barriers in different ways. And most young people felt that political leaders tried to prevent young people from voting. Youth were clearly aware of political motivations to undermine their participation. Youth also commonly reported fear of voter intimidation and violence at the polls. In the aftermath of Trump's false claims about electoral integrity, some conservative politicians threatened legal action for ballot mistakes. So this can be especially intimidating for first-time voters. And some young people reported fear about going to polling places because of political tensions and violence. One young person said that voting is no longer a private matter. It feels unsafe now. Another young person reported that the biggest challenge that they faced to voting was fear of being attacked based on their vote. And in our analyses, we found that Asian American young people were much less likely to vote in person at polling places than other young people. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, hate crimes against Asian Americans were heightened. So some Asian American youth may have avoided polling places for fear of discrimination or violence. Overall, when we asked young people about the biggest challenges they experienced to registering and voting, by far the most common response, it wasn't about lack of political knowledge or lack of motivation. The biggest obstacles that they reported were procedural barriers, challenges that were inherent in the process of registering and voting. And for example, one person said that I didn't realize my voting status had been suspended due to moving. I didn't realize until days before registration closed. So I had to mail in my updated information and hope it worked out. And youth often highlighted complexities of the registration process that intersected with challenges due to disability status, race, social class, and other features as well. So this general perspective of youth barriers nationwide and youth experiences of those barriers gives us a foundation for examining California's policies. And next, Rio is going to walk us through the California policy landscape.
Thank you, Dr. Weigemer. So now that we understand the structural barriers to youth voting in general, we can now turn to California in context. What's going well and what needs to be better? We'll be first looking at registration policies. Registration serves as a gatekeeper to voting, making it a primary obstacle to youth voting. Both nationwide and in California, about 2/3 of adults are registered to vote, but youth registration rates are 20 points lower. In fact, the majority of the academic research on youth voting barriers focuses on registration. Notably, there is a tremendous variability across states in youth registration rates, ranging from 42% in Nevada to 87% in New Jersey as of the 2020 election. California has relatively progressive registration policies, but still ranks 25th here. As a particular trend in California, the state does well in voting rates compared to other states, but ranks lower in registration rates. It ranks 15th in voting, but 25th in registration. These discrepant rankings suggest that California is good at getting registered youth to vote, but can be better at getting them registered in the first place. Therefore, increasing registration can be a powerful strategy for California. So let's dig into the registration policies. First, we're considering the progressive policies that California has. Well, first, California implemented a same-day registration law in 2017. Overall, the registration rate in California increased from 78% in 2016 to 88% in 2020. in part because of the implementation of this same-day registration. And young voters are substantially more likely to utilize the same-day registration procedures than other voters. Actually, more than double the rate of any other age groups. You can see in the graph here that 3% of young people relied on same-day registration, which declined with age. Another progressive registration law in California is online voter registration, implemented in 2012. Empirical evidence suggests that this kind of policy is linked to a 2 percentage point increase in youth registration rates. However, one caveat is the higher rejection rate in California. Out of the application received, around 11% are rejected in the state, as opposed to 6% nationally. These rejection rates imply that some people in the state struggle with the complicated registration policies online. It is also important to recognize the county-level variation in youth registration rates, ranging from 94% in Placer County to 40% in Trinity County. In the 3 largest counties, the registration rates are around 2/3. Los Angeles has about 67%, San Diego 62%, and Orange County has 70%. This suggests that barriers may be distributed unevenly across counties. For instance, there are growing anti-democratic sentiments that threaten youth participation in California, as Dr. Wegemer said, and some precincts like Huntington Beach are trying to implement restrictive voting practices, such as new ID laws. When we look at the pre-registration rates, we can again find quite a variation, from about 7% in Mauda County to 21% in Marin County. Given that most pre-registration is processed through the DMV, this variation may be due to the different likelihoods of getting driver's license in each county. Overall in California, only 13% of 16 and 17-year-olds were pre-registered, which is very low. And this low rate may also be due to the reliance on DMV, as the percentage of 16 years old getting a driver's license has dropped from 43% to 25% in the past 2 decades. But pre-registration could be utilized more effectively because it is linked to an increase in registration rates by at least 2 percentage points. Now we are looking at the voting rates. State-level policy suggests that California is more conducive to youth voting compared to most states, as California was ranked 15th in the country for youth voting rates in 2020. To give some evidence for such strength, in the 2020 election, the average wait time to vote in California was 4.1 minutes, which was lower than the national average of 11.6 minutes. However, people with disabilities in California had a 10% lower voting rate than those without disabilities, which was higher than the national average. California Voters' Choice Act of 2016 helped make voting more accessible, but not all counties have implemented it yet. Our survey data from Californian youth, we saw a clear trend in the methods of voting. More than a half, which is 55% down on the bottom of the slide, of young adults chose not to vote in person, either voting by mail or using a secure ballot box. About 42% mailed in and 14% used a secure ballot box. Of the 45% of Californian young adults in our study who did vote in person, voting early was nearly twice as popular as voting on election day. We see here 28% for early voting as opposed to 70% for voting on the election day. As we can see, voting by mail was by far the most prevalent method of voting for young adults. Research on LA voters found that universal mail-in voting was associated with a 3 percentage point increase in voting rates among voters who hadn't used mail-in voting before. In another study that included Californian voters, there were no partisan differences among the increased number of votes. As California keeps striving to reduce structural barriers to voting, voting by mail is a powerful strategy, as you can see. All of these taken together, we're considering the cumulative cost. So structural barriers to registering and voting as we discussed before, are experienced holistically by youth as a cumulative cost to their political participation. That is, research has shown that effective multiple restrictive voting policies on young people work together to constrain voting. The Cost of Voting Index, or COVI for short, summarizes 30 election laws across all 50 states and create an indicator that captures the difficulty of voting. The cost of voting, election turnout is lower where COVI scores are higher, and restrictive voting policies have a greater negative effect on the turnout of young voters. Related to this, in our own study, we found that young people bore a substantial material cost to their political participation. On average, they spent about 30 minutes to drive to a ballot box or polling location, and some people waited for up to 5 hours to vote. Another major consideration among youth was the lost wages. We also found these sort of material costs, that being financial costs, lost wages, and transportation costs, were unequally distributed. Black youth experienced greater costs for voting than white, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, and multiracial youth. Also, immigrant youth reported substantially higher costs than non-immigrant youth from the data shows. So as we can see, California had the 6th lowest COVI score nationally, meaning that the state has a policy climate overall with lower costs and greater ease of voting compared to most other states, nevertheless. And we have already touched on most of these strengths already, but let's quickly go over it again. Some progressive state policies include the allowance of student ID for registration and the pre-registration policy. Since automatic registration at the DMV was implemented in 2018, it has become the most common way for Californians to register for voting. California is also one of a growing number of states that allows mail ballots to all voters. Although California has relatively progressive policies, there are still several ways it can improve democratic participation, and here are a few notable examples. First, 13 other states allow automatic registration through state agency other than the DMV. 6 other states have back-end automatic registration, also called secure automatic voter registration, where citizens are automatically registered unless they opt out. Also, California has repeatedly failed to pass legislation that would allow 17-year-olds to vote in primary election when they would turn 18 before the general election. California also doesn't have a state holiday on election day, but may still face, and many young people and marginalized groups may choose to vote on election day, but may still face barriers. This simple scorecard of policies that other states have and California does not helps point to the policy recommendations we are offering. So now Dr. Lake is going to expand more on that.
So we have four major policy recommendations that lawmakers can consider and work to implement based on the research that we conducted. The first recommendation is to maintain promotive policies. California already has many policies in place that represent best practices in reducing barriers to youth voting. Notably, the Voters' Choice Act of 2016 modernized California's voting system in multiple ways, by mailing every voter a ballot, by expanding early in-person voting, by allowing voters to cast a ballot in any vote center in their county, and by providing secure ballot drop-off locations throughout the county. These are evidence-based practices that enhance voting and also youth voting. The VCA must be fully and equally implemented across counties in California. As Rio just presented, there's considerable county-level variation in youth registration and voting rates, suggesting the need for a more systematic implementation of the VCA across counties. The VCA also needs to continue to be studied as it is implemented to understand the long-term impacts of these best practices. At a time when voting rights are under attack in some places, it's especially important to think about protecting and upholding the policies that we already know exist and make sure they're fully implemented based on their documented effectiveness for reducing voting barriers. Our second policy recommendation is to allow 17-year-old primary voting. 20 different states already allow 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections when they will turn 18 on Election Day. This policy requires a state constitutional amendment that has been proposed 6 known times in California. Most recently, this amendment to the Constitution was proposed by ACA 4, which became Proposition 18 on the 2020 ballot. As you can see with the results shown here, the results of that election resulted in the proposition losing by a margin of roughly 44% to 56%. Despite the rejection of this policy by the people of California, this is a modest and logical step to encouraging more electoral participation among young people. Many other states already utilize this policy. This is a simple change that would bring more young people to the polls and would also establish long-term voting habits. It may be worth trying again with clearer messaging to the people of California about why this policy is important, how it's beneficial to young people, and also perhaps after more decisive evidence accumulates across other states. Our third policy recommendation is to implement secure automatic voter registration. California's automatic voter registration process is not actually fully automated. It's what's called a front-end opt-out process. That means that it requires users to affirmatively answer registration questions while conducting typical DMV business, which many young people, evidence shows, decline to do during the regular DMV business process. Secure AVR, which is also called back-end automatic voter registration, refers to a fully automated registration system where individuals would not need to take any action to be registered and instead could take action to opt out. States with this policy see a boost in registration and also in voting rates. We were pleased to see that proposed legislation to implement this already exists in Senate Bill 299. This bill would require the DMV to automatically submit information to the Secretary of State to register or pre-register anyone in their system who's eligible to vote. This bill would also expand the list of official voter registration agencies beyond the DMV to any agency determined by the Secretary of State to already be collecting the necessary information to register young people to vote, or anyone to vote. Examples of these agencies include healthcare and social service agencies. Going beyond the DMVs, as Rio said, is especially important because for young people, because fewer high school students than ever before are getting their driver's licenses. We recommend to the Secretary of State that high schools be explicitly designated as official voter registration sites. Schools already are collecting the necessary information to register young people to vote. And offering automatic voter registration, and especially secure automatic voter registration through high schools, could go a long way to addressing the shockingly low pre-registration rates of 16 and 17-year-olds in California. Our fourth recommendation is that schools need financial support in order to appropriately act on registering or pre-registering students to vote. Although Assembly Bill 2627 was recently held in committee, we had identified this bill as promising because it designates a specific civic learning, outreach, and engagement fund for high schools who want to offer voter registration activities and also integrate these into their civic education initiatives. These efforts are shown by research to support students' civic learning and enhance their voting rates. AB 2627 didn't go far enough in our view, however, as we would recommend providing funding to all public high schools in California to do voter registration and to require voter registration efforts in high schools. The policy California already has for voter education weeks in high schools is a nice idea. It's a great effort, but schools lack the funding to implement large-scale voter registration efforts. And we know that schools are where young people spend the majority of their time, so they're a worthy investment for voter registration initiatives. So in summary, these 4 recommendations resulted from the research that we conducted. We recommend that California maintain existing policies that promote broad access to voting, such as in the Voters' Choice Act, and make sure these policies are equally implemented across counties. We recommend resurrecting Proposition 18 to allow 17-year-olds to vote in primaries when they'll turn 18 by Election Day. We recommend implementing automatic secure voter registration because our research pointed to registration as the most significant structural barrier to voting that young people face. We recommend utilizing schools as sites to register young people and providing adequate funding for schools to make voter registration an integral part of their operations. And overall, our assessment is that California is doing many different things well and can strategically implement additional policies as the ones that we recommended to better offer a supportive climate for young voters. So in closing, we want to emphasize that at age 18 and beyond, young people have a constitutional right to vote. In fact, the 26th Amendment states that the right to vote cannot be denied or abridged by the U.S. or any state based on age. Our research has shown that significant structural barriers that young people face to registering and voting are directly linked to state policies and practices, and these barriers are arguably abridging young people's rights to vote. A growing number of legal scholars are starting to challenge local and state laws across the country that disproportionately affect young people's voting rates as unconstitutional based on the 26th Amendment. California has demonstrated a deep commitment to expanding access to voting across the state. By continuing this commitment and strengthening its policies, California can proactively address these age disparities and further reduce youth barriers to voting. Thank you very much.
Great. All right, thank you so much for that fantastic talk by Dr. Ray Leake, Dr. Wegemer, and their team. And so this time I'm going to ask them to come on up for Q&A, but then also for Deputy Secretary Jackson to come on up and basically kind of provide some remarks, and then our first question. So thank you.
All right, so let's give them another round of applause for the work that they've done here. Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier, Secretary Weber is definitely data-driven. And so everything that you provided in the white paper will definitely assist us when we go back to the legislature to request funding, but also look at some of the policy recommendations and the bills that are on the table now. As you mentioned, some of them didn't go far enough, and so that's where you all come in to help kind of advocate for that. So I'll go through. I was actually taking copious notes as you guys were talking, in addition to the information that my team put together prior to today. I do just want to address some of the concerns or the issues that you guys brought up, but also making sure that the focus is on California, because that's what we have control over and that's what works for us, but also recognizing that other states, there are barriers there, but having the data for both kind of to compare California to other areas is super helpful. So I'll start with the disproportionate administrative burden. We have, over the years, adjusted the voter registration card. A lot of the information that's currently on the voter registration card actually comes from the federal side because they need to be able to identify certain information. So while we as a state do not have voter ID laws, Huntington Beach was mentioned. Recently, the Secretary of State and the Attorney General Rob Bonta did sue the city of Huntington Beach for what they're trying to do there. There are other things that go on throughout the state that go alongside with that voter ID law. However, in California, you do have to prove that you are who you are. And so having the option of using your school ID is great. Having the option of using your California ID, your driver's license, or your passport is also great. But the information itself there is required, right? You need to be able to let us know your country of origin. That's again on the federal side. But we are here to help. There is an online version to the voter registration card, but there's also a paper version. So if you want to take it home, you want to talk about it with your family, with your friends, definitely do that. But the information that's on there, some of it is optional, but most of the information is required, and there are only 10 questions. It doesn't sound, I mean, you know, it is a long paper because it's legal size, but there are only 10 questions. Definitely reach out to either our office or your local voter registration office if you have questions. Let's see, and then in terms of voting, like where you want to vote or where you would like to register, we always use the model of register to vote where you think your vote will have the most impact. So if you are a college student, you are from Southern California, but you go to school in Northern California, maybe your family owns property down in Southern California, but maybe up here in Northern California, they're trying to rezone your school or whatever it is. Vote where you have the most impact. You have that option as a California voter. You can change your voter registration within the year, but you want to, again, make sure that you're understanding the issues on the ballot before you register to vote. So we can also help with that. We have different tools and tricks that you can use to decide what would work best for you. But it's really a personal decision where you think that your vote will make the most impact. So keep that in mind when it comes to where to register. In terms of voter intimidation and voter disenfranchisement, talked about that a little bit when it comes to Huntington Beach. But the vote by mail ballot is a tool that is available for everyone starting in 2020. During COVID, we realized people did not want to go out and vote. There are some people that would love to just vote only in person, and they had their mask and gloves and all those things, but we have the luxury in California to receive your ballot by mail. So you literally do not have to leave your home to cast your ballot. What I like to share with people is you can have a voter information guide party. In addition to receiving your ballot in the mail, you also receive a voter information guide. We, as the California Secretary of State, we are required to provide a statewide voter information guide, so that will cover all the propositions, and this year there are going to be many. All of the propositions, all of the statewide seats, so your assembly, your Senate, your Attorney General, Governor, President, all of those things are in our voter information guide. In addition to that, you also receive one from whatever county you are registered to vote in. So say, for instance, you are a Northern California student, but you're registered in Southern California. You can still get your ballot mailed to this address here, even though it's down in San Diego. My daughter, who is a graduate student, she lives in San Francisco. She's still registered to vote at our family home in San Diego. And so she has the option of getting her ballot mailed to her home or her residence in San Francisco. And so the county voter information guide will have everything that you need to vote locally. So those are like your measures, your potholes, things like that, local mayors, all those things. We don't cover that. We only cover the statewide. But collectively, between the statewide voter information guide and the county voter information guide, you have what you need to be a successful voter wherever it is that you choose to vote. In addition to voter intimidation and then voter security, I think that was also brought up, is there's an option for you to be a poll observer. Most of the counties in California have kind of adjusted their observation areas. So the secretary and I, we visit the counties often, different counties, and they have like a hallway. And so you can see every ballot open. You can see what they're doing with the ballot, and the ballot and the envelope are never in the same place twice. So the person that is opening the envelope will never see, you know, what's on the other side of that envelope, like where you voted. So that is illegal to actually look at someone's vote and say, I know that you voted for so-and-so. That's not what they're supposed to be doing, and that's why there are mechanisms in place to avoid that. And so there's a separate room for the envelope, and the envelope is separated, and then it's pushed, the ballot itself is pushed through, and then counted in the secure ballot counting machine. And all of those machines that every county uses is certified through the California Secretary of State. We do have a section in our executive division that just focuses on the ballot machines. So you want more information on that, let us know. Looking down at just registration as a whole, we have more eligible voters in the state of California than many other states combined. And so definitely there will be some sort of disparities in the numbers of registration versus the number of people that actually vote. I think overall we do a great job with registration, with the numbers being as high as they are based on the eligible voters, but the voter turnout is where it is low across the board. There is not any county, I think, that got over 50% in the primary, which is really sad. And so we have been tasked with in helping to increase the voter turnout. It's our job as a nonpartisan agency to just state the facts. This is what's on the ballot. This is how long you have, and that's it. We don't discuss the candidates. We don't discuss the issues. We just provide the information, and then you make the informed decision as a voter to vote. Let's see. So same-day voter registration was also brought up, which is great. We definitely like the option of same-day voter registration. This is especially important for college students when they're not sure, like, oh my gosh, it's election day tomorrow and I can't make it to where I need to be. That's the great thing that we have here in California, is that you can register and vote the same day. But because it is a conditional voter registration, you won't be you will not be counted until we can make sure that you did not vote somewhere else. Like you're in San Francisco today, and then tomorrow you're going to be in Ventura County also doing the same thing. So that's why it takes a little longer to certify elections, just because we're checking on those same-day voter registrations. But we want to work on getting people to register early. Having that option is great, right? But in order to avoid any concerns, or also for you to have the opportunity to see what's on the ballot and kind of study and make your informed decision, we want to make sure that you are registering before the same day, although the option is there. Let's see, online voter registration barriers. So the National Voter Registration National Voter Registration Agency, or NVRA, this is where the DMV comes in. The DMV is one of the primary sources of NVRA because of its access. People are getting not only their driver's license, but they're also getting an ID card, which I highly recommend for high school students, is to have an ID card, because there are some places that do not accept your student ID as an ID. The DMV is one way. There are other national voter registration agencies in California. The others are the counties themselves. When people are applying for social services, for instance. You have Medi-Cal, you have cash benefits, the food stamps, all of those things is still part of that process. So even as college students, some of you do qualify for food stamps, and so that's another way to kind of get you registered to vote as well. We are working on other agencies, hopefully to kind of open up their doors and let us in. Earlier last year, there was one tribe, actually, that became an agency, NVRA. And they're not too far from here. I forget the name of the tribe. The Miwok Indians, not too far from here, the Native American tribe, they became their first NVRA. And so because on their land they have a federal health center, they are able to become a national voter registration agency. So we're hoping that other tribes that have that same designation would want to become NVRA agency as well. Voting costs. Money is definitely a huge piece of everything that we do, especially as it relates to outreach. We don't have a ton of money to do much of anything. And as I was explaining to the panel earlier, we do have measures in place that can help with that, like virtual events and things like that. But I think our best tool that we have right now for getting those young people to vote is our Student Votes Project program. We are required by law to, like I said earlier, connect with the individual campuses. The California State Universities and the community colleges are required to provide one person on their campus that's designated to do civic engagement and education. We are great partners with the UCs. I think we have a contact for all of your campuses, as well as the private colleges, independent colleges and universities. They too are great partners and provide that support. So I look forward to your questions. And, oh, wait, one more piece, sorry. The funding of schools. I know we're short on time. But the funding of the high school voter registration. We have a very robust high school voter registration program. We work very closely with the California Department of Education. 2 times a year, the state of California has high school voter education weeks. Last 2 weeks of April, last 2 weeks of September. We work closely with the California Department of Education to produce a letter that goes out to every school every year, twice a year, to encourage them to have some sort of voter registration on their campus. Funding, of course, is a huge piece of that. We don't have access to funding, but there is the state of California that can be advocated for to ask them for money to do that. But we also want to use the tools that we have. The voter registration cards are complimentary. You can request them from our office and we'll send them to you complimentary, and that helps. It also just takes literally 1 or 2 people on the high school campuses to help push that effort. We go to high schools ourselves to register, and we work with the registrar of voters. But another piece that we have implemented this year, now that COVID is over, is the student mock election, which can start as early as 5th grade. So 5th grade through 12th grade, we have a student mock election. Again, those resources are complimentary. The schools sign up and we send them a packet full of stuff where they can do a student mock election. They can vote for Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, whatever. But it does take the effort of the campuses themselves, the high school campuses, in order to implement that. We can do what we can from here, but it does take the work on the ground in order to get those students pre-registered to vote. And so I think I covered almost everything that you guys shared, so I will step over here for a Q&A. Thank you. Sorry I went over a little.
Thank you.